ינהל את הדיון עופר דורון, מנהל מפעל מבט חלל של התעשייה האווירית. מכיוון שכולכם שמעתם מי הוא ומה הוא כבר בבוקר, אז בבקשה עופר.
To the limited numbers of ladies and gentlemen who are still with us, I presume we will have more people coming in as we speak. I apologize for my CEO who has fallen sick, has lost his voice totally, and is therefore slightly limited in his capacity to manage this panel. And I will try to do as best as I can in his place. So this panel today is on space exploration, the global vision and future plans. And before we start with the panel of the heads of agencies, I would like to invite Dr. Paul Ludger Weissenberg. Dr. Weissenberg is a PhD in law, in European law from the University of Geneva. He's been working in the European Commission from 1989 as a member of the cabinet of Dr. Martin Bangemann, who was the vice president of the EC, responsible for industrial policy, and was head of the cabinet from 1996. From 2000 to 2005, he was head of the Single Market Directorate, responsible, amongst others, for automotive and pharmaceutical legislation. From 2005 to 2010, he moved into space and was in charge of the Directorate for Aerospace, GMS, which is the Earth Observation Program, Security and Defense, and was appointed coordinator of those within DG Enterprise and Industry. And in 2011, became responsible as Deputy Director General for the directorates and units in charge of the Galileo and GMS programs, space, security, chemicals, and raw materials. I would like to invite Dr. Weissenberg, please.
Excellencies, Ambassador, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, and thank you very much for the kind introduction. It's a pleasure and honor for me to be with you this afternoon, and I'm grateful to our Israeli friends that they have invited me to join you again to this outstanding event. Once a year, Tel Aviv, Ilan Ramon is the place to be to talk about space. In the presence of so many eminent personalities from around the world. And commemorating Ilan Ramon is a noble way to remind us that space is a global challenge and human efforts and sacrifices are part of it. At the same time, this conference is an invitation to look ahead, to reflect. And this audience is unique for such a kind of reflection. It's an opportunity for all of us, a forum, the Greeks would say a sort of symposium, to exchange ideas on space and how to shape the future of space for our common goal. This country and the European Union have a very particular privileged partnership. My President, Mr. Barroso, and my Vice President, Mr. Tajani, are visiting this country regularly. Our cooperation covers all areas. We have a political dialogue, we talk about trade, we talk about education, we talk about culture, and of course, we talk about space. And this country has a high-tech sector which offers a huge potential. The economy of Israel has shown resilience during the current economic downturn. And space technology is for us an example of an enabling technology that can drive technological development and innovation. Investing in space today is investing in employment and growth tomorrow. The European Commission is firmly convinced that space is part of the answer to tackling the current crisis. Our goal in Europe is to step up our investment into new technologies. We have a robust industrial base. We have to preserve it. And we will invest heavily in the future of space. This growing commitment of the European Union in favor of space is not rhetorical. We need to spend more in space. We need to do it better. And we need to do it better together. The Commission's proposal for the next financial perspective, covering 2014 to 2020, would bring investment in space to 2 billion euros per year for the European Union. This envelope covers continued support for research and development and includes the deployment and operation of the two flagships, Galileo and Copernicus, the former GMES, Global Monitoring for Environment and Security. This country, Israel, is a very successful partner of the EU space programs, particularly in space and security research. As many as 24 organizations from Israel participated in the last call. This confirms the positive tendency. This country has proven scientific excellence. But the value of Israel's participation goes well beyond research, technology, projects, and money. It brings people together from the European Union and from Israel. It's an exercise in bridge building between human beings. Space is considered to be a vector of integration inside the Union and in our relations with privileged partners like Israel. The EU competence in space is shared with our member states. And I see in the audience some of our colleagues. Yannick Descartes, President from CNES, Enrico Sagese, President from ASI. We are talking a lot how to make it happen, this shared competence. And the key word is reinforced partnership between member states and the European Union. To have the competence is fine, but you have to exercise it. You have to have an idea what is the role you want to play in space as European Union. And to be blunt and simple, our plaidoyer is the future of space lies primarily on Earth, primarily. The EU heads of states and governments have identified two flagship programs, Galileo navigation, Copernicus, former GMES, Earth observation. These two projects deliver benefit for the citizen. EGNOS, the European space-based augmentation system, is already fully operational. It is Europe's first venture into satellite navigation. It enhances accuracy in Europe, but as well around Europe. This means that today farmers of Israel can use EGNOS for high precision farming. With Galileo, we go one step further. Galileo is the EU's own infrastructure for satellite navigation. It's the first truly EU infrastructure, a sort of EU capability. And Galileo and EGNOS are excellent examples of the excellent cooperation we have with Israel. We are planning to set up a ground station in Haifa, and I'm grateful for the support of the Israeli authorities. We will set up an increased cooperation on Galileo in the field of navigation. The text is ready for signature. I can initial it tomorrow. Space people talk a lot about space infrastructure. Fair enough. For us, services is the key word. And with the authorization of Jean-Jacques Dordain, I'm quoting him often publicly, he said, "Space is a service before being a technology." And this reflects pretty much the thinking in Brussels. But of course, in order to have services, you need to have a robust infrastructure. That's why we have decided to accelerate the deployment of Galileo in order to deliver first services in 2014. And I'm grateful to Jean-Jacques Dordain and his personal commitment on this very sensitive file. And we are stepping up our efforts in our international relations with GPS. Galileo will become interoperable with GPS. And I would like to thank our US friends for the very constructive talks we had last year in Washington about this topic. Next to Galileo is the second flagship. Another eminent European personality, Copernicus, has given his name to this project, Copernicus. Earth observation is more complicated than navigation, complex, ambitious. Based on a partnership between the EU, ESA, member states, and EUMETSAT. This makes it more complicated to manage. And Earth observation is not just about space. Earth-based measurements are needed in combination with data from space. We will deliver marine services, land services, emergency services in a very operational manner. And Copernicus is underpinning some of our policies, civil protection and security. It's a very valuable tool for decision makers to obtain real-time data for damage assessment after earthquakes or tsunami. Galileo and Copernicus are infrastructures. They are public infrastructures, but they are more. They are critical infrastructures. And if you are the owner of a critical infrastructure, you need to maintain it. You need to protect it. For example, from collisions with debris or other satellites. Member states therefore urge us to set up a European space surveillance system at the level of the European Union. And again, we are working with our American friends to explore synergies with their system and the system to be set up in Europe. International cooperation is key to virtually everything we do in space. This is particularly true for space exploration. And this conference reminds us that we need to go global if we talk about exploration. And not just because of the money involved. International crews on the ISS demonstrate since the beginning that this is a global endeavor for humanity. And it's a cultural challenge, as Dr. Neal pointed out. This country and its citizen Ilan Ramon has contributed to this challenge for humankind. Human beings will continue to be attracted to the unknown. It's in our genes. It's in our nature. And I'm grateful that you have put exploration so prominently on the agenda. And again, I'm grateful to our US friends. They are organizing the next exploration conference, the global one, in the US, early 2014. So again, dear friends from Israel, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for maintaining the momentum for space. You, all of us, let's keep the ball rolling for space. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Weissenberg. Space exploration, we all know, is a fascinating and an inspiring undertaking, and it stretches the boundaries of human imagination and of technological capabilities. In commemorating the Columbia STS-107 mission, we remember with great yearning the excitement that so many Israelis felt when our first countryman flew in space, and our anguish at the tragic outcome of that flight. Israel has a rather unbalanced approach to space exploration. On the one hand, we have a very advanced space technology program, and we have an extremely strong scientific community in theoretical astrophysics, with a strong worldwide presence and in some areas even some leadership. On the other hand, Israel has never flown its own space exploration mission or reaped many of the technological benefits that come with such an endeavor. Recently, the Israeli government has for the first time allocated a significant budget, parts of which may be allocated towards space exploration missions. We are currently working with other agencies to potentially prepare such programs, such as Ultrasat, which was discussed earlier on today, and Musar to map Venus. And these may open the door to practical Israeli participation in space exploration. And it may provide Israel with a fascinating opportunity to leverage our significant industrial expertise in highly capable, lightweight Earth observation satellites and our strong astrophysical community towards a meaningful international cooperation on exciting science at a bearable cost. To discuss different views of space exploration, from the very, very large through small satellite producers and to countries who produce technologies and ideas, but all want to deal in space exploration. We have with us today a very distinguished and experienced panel of space agency leaders, each with a vision of where space exploration should head and how they plan to get there. And I have no doubt that it makes for a very fascinating discussion. So with that, I would like to invite, almost in alphabetical order, Yuri Alexeyev, the chairman of NKAU, the State Space Agency of Ukraine. Yuri. Yuri. Tal. Yuri. Sir Charles Walden, please. Needs no introduction, NASA Administrator. Professor Isaac Ben Israel, Itzik, Chairman of the Israeli Space Agency. Geir Hovmork, Deputy Director General of the Norwegian Space Center. And Christian Pedersen, Head of DTU Space. And last but not least, I would like to invite Professor Yannick Descata, Head of CNES, the French Space Agency. Professor Descata is on his way to the airport to leave, so he has asked that instead of being part of the overall questions, he's going to give an opening talk on space exploration and then leave the hard questions to the other guys. Professor, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and all of you for your flexibility. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, dear friends, good afternoon to all of you, and Happy New Year. And I would also like to begin by thanking the organizing committee for having invited me to this roundtable. This roundtable is about space exploration, a global vision, and future plans. And I thought interesting to begin to introduce those reflections by the definition of space exploration as provided by the ESA Advisory Group on Exploration. And I will quote it, and I'd like to make some comments which will embark some of the previous remarks raised by the previous roundtable and by Paul Weissenberg. So, I quote this definition: space exploration is an open-ended project, relying on both human and robotic activities to extend access to unknown terrains and environments by means of direct humans and or indirect automated missions and robots presence through a systematic approach, including preparatory activities to open new frontiers for the progress and acquisition of new knowledge, and to present options to extend the range of human actions and inspire future generations. So it's a little bit long, but it's, to our point of view, an excellent definition because everything is in it. Except maybe that searching for habitable planets around nearby stars, exoplanets, is also exploration. But we can admit to restrict the term space exploration to the destinations that could be reached by humans in a not too far future, which means the closest objects in the solar system: Moon, Mars, its satellites, and asteroids. So I would like to make three comments on this definition. The first is about an open-ended project, the second is about robotic and human activities, and the third one is about acquisition of new knowledge. First, space exploration is an open-ended project. It is true that, actually, it is made of many individual projects contributing to common long-term objectives. The participants of the different projects are not the same according to their own priorities and competence. So, if we compare to the ISS, which is of course a remarkable international cooperation, as it was explained this morning, ISS doesn't fit exactly with this vision of exploration because it is a single project limited in time and not many individual projects open-ended. So we think that we have to go further, to invent a new kind of organization or governance for space exploration. As no country is able to do the whole thing, the whole exploration project together, alone, we believe that we must do it together and that there is a real need to set up a global, high-level strategy that can be endorsed by the political level. It was discussed in the previous roundtable about this global exploration high-level strategy. But what is important to us is that it has to be raised to the political level, unless it will not be sustainable. This global high-level strategy has been initiated by the LUCA, conference in Italy in November 11. It was already mentioned. And the next, as Paul said, will be in December. No, not in December, in January, he told me, next year in Washington, D.C. And we hope that substantial progress toward a common vision will be made, because even if it is large talks, they are necessary for building such large worldwide exploration programs, which are global, as Paul said. The second comment is about human and robotic activities together. This is, of course, an old debate, and it's obvious that both activities are complementary. But what does that mean exactly, complementary? Is it 50-50 or 90-10, 10-90? And this ratio, of course, will not be fixed forever and for all situations. But we must not forget that we are talking for not now, we are talking for the next decades. And if we remark that the Apollo program is more than 40 years old, and if I remember 40 years ago, when I was a young researcher, my calculations, computations were running all night long, at least, on a computer as large as part of this room. And today the same calculations are performed in a few minutes on a desktop personal computer. So what will be possible in 40 years from now, we don't know. In the fields of autonomy, artificial intelligence, robotics, I mean, we cannot probably imagine what we shall be able to do. And this has to be taken into account. We can also consider some other examples of activities working in extreme or hostile conditions, such as deep sea exploration or nuclear industry. They all try to avoid as much as possible human activities, which does not mean exclude. Human activities are always necessary, but to limit them as much as possible in hazardous environments. Finally, the third comment is about the progress and acquisition of new knowledge. Space exploration addresses a lot of essential scientific questions about the place of human beings in the universe, such as what is habitability of planets, how life emerged, and so on. So exploration, space exploration, is at the crossroad of many stakes, many interests: science, technology, innovation, industry, politics, philosophy, public opinion, and so on. If science is, of course, not the only driver of exploration, we believe that a strong support of the largest scientific community is absolutely necessary to make this huge effort acceptable by the public opinion and by the politicians, and to make it sustainable. We absolutely need, it is our thinking, we absolutely need for exploration the support of the scientific community. For instance, it's amazing to look when Curiosity landed on Mars and began exploration, the tremendous impact that it had on the general public and on the youth with this extraordinary realization by NASA that I want to, how to say, congratulations. It's amazing, okay? And we see that this comes from this science and exploration of Mars by the public, and so we think that this is a good demonstration that the support by the scientific community is absolutely necessary, and it will inspire young people towards scientific and technical careers. Now I will conclude by making another quotation, and this one is extracted from the resolution of the 5th European Space Council in September 2008. Paul remembers very well. It's the Council of Ministers of the European Union and ESA at the same time. And I quote, "Space exploration is a political and global endeavor, and Europe should undertake its action within a worldwide program, without any monopoly or appropriation by one country, the different actors taking part with their own capacities and priorities." Now, I just want to repeat that space exploration is a fantastic new opportunity. Each time is a new opportunity that we create for international cooperation, for going further in international cooperation, and space exploration is clearly the adventure of the whole mankind together. Thank you for your attention, and I'm sure that you will find a lot of subject to discuss after what I have said. Thank you very much.
Straight to the airport. Thank you very much. Okay, guys, it's time to take up the microphones and I will start with the small guys first. I was debating whether to start with Mr. Bolden or with the small agencies. I think I'll start with the small agencies first. So Itzik, I will take the opportunity to give you the first shot. Space exploration is the game of the big boys. We've heard 3 or 4 heads of agencies in the previous panel, when pressed about space exploration, turn that way and say, we'll follow NASA's lead. So what is the role of a small space agency, and how do you see space exploration playing a part in that? Itzik.
Well, it's a tough question. Being small means, among other things, that we have limited budget, and therefore we cannot do everything we wish to do. Nevertheless, we can first contribute to efforts done by the big ones, like NASA, for example, or the European Space Agency. And secondly, we can contribute in, at least in proposing new ideas and pushing somehow the space community towards certain directions. We talk a lot here, I mean, we are here in the Ramon conference, and this is one area in which we cannot do it by ourselves. I mean, we cannot do a human space exploration with the limited resources that we have. Nevertheless, and this is only as an example, we can use other vehicles like the shuttle at the time, or perhaps the International Space Station in the future, and send our people or people coming from Israel and trained as astronauts to do experiments in tests. If I give you one example, we are talking, I don't know how to define the exact status of this project, but we are talking with NASA about a project which was, I think, mentioned here this morning. We call it LIM, or Ultrasat. This is a scientific project, a satellite which has to, which will measure supernova explosions in a relatively wide field. And this is something we cannot do by ourselves, but we can do in cooperation with NASA, contributing few systems, components, and scientific ideas that we have a relative advantage in. In the past, we spoke about trying to map planet Venus. Planet Venus is covered with clouds, and therefore, if you want to map it, you need some payload that can map the surface of the planet using radar or synthetic aperture radar payload. Now, we are not the only one who have this technology, but we are the only ones, perhaps, who have this technology lightweight enough due to the constraints that we have here. I mean, we are small. Small is a disadvantage. Sometimes it pushes you in the right direction. As you probably know, we cannot launch our satellites but into the Mediterranean. And this is, Earth is rotating from west to east, and we are launching our satellites in the wrong direction, westward. And therefore, this enforced this, we had to solve this problem by finding ways to build payloads and satellites which will be very lightweight. And therefore, we found ourselves, and this is the example of planet Venus, we found ourselves with a payload which is capable of doing synthetic aperture radar with as good resolution as the big ones, but weighing something like 80 kilograms, less 150 pounds. And so these are examples of what a small country can do if, of course, if it's taking space seriously, and we do take space seriously, and we would like to have more projects like this.
And I would like to ask the same question. Christian, why don't we start with you?
Thank you. I think history and experience definitely shows that even small nations can contribute and harvest from space. I mean, both Denmark and many other countries, and Israel has harvested enormously from investments in space, even though we are small and with a limited and small budget compared to big nations. And I think the key is that we need to have knowledge, be it in the scientific area, in technology, at the highest international level, so we are attractive partners to ESA or NASA or other agencies, so we can contribute important knowledge to the missions and also harvest the fruits from the missions afterwards. So I think if we have that, we are attractive partners and can make valuable contributions. Of course, we cannot make big contributions, make our own big satellite missions. We have to depend on international collaboration and openness. So in that way, I think that the history of Denmark and Israel shows that space is definitely not an option that we should not pursue, but it's a very fruitful route to pursue, not only for science and technology, but for the benefit of society.
But is the space exploration the correct place to put your resources from a small country?
We don't put all our resources in space, unfortunately, but it's definitely worthwhile to invest in space. In particular, because I mean the grand vision of space is a benefit to society, to put the visions and the high ambitions, but also to drive our industry and to benefit from the more mundane applications of space. So yes, it's definitely worth the investment.
Geir, what is your view on your participation in space exploration?
Norway, or the Space Center, our budget is close to 100 million euro a year. We pay about 65 million of that to ESA, which is our major R&D and also scientific organization. Of course, with this amount of money, it's not much you can do in real exploration. But then again, we have ESA, and one of the really good things with ESA is a mandatory program. Everybody has to pay to that to the basic activities of ESA, including the science program, according to your GMP. So we can pay 2.5% of ESA budget, and we can have one vote be involved in deciding the scientific missions. And so far, most of the exploration, or more or less all up till recently, exploration mission in ESA has been in that program. We have a Giotto, quite successful, to the Halley's Comet, Mars, Venus. We had Cassini-Huygens or Huygens probe, and of course, several people also here today are sitting and waiting for the Rosetta mission and the encounter in some few years to, I can't even mention the name of that asteroid, but of course we look forward to that. So there's an opportunity there. Of course you need to have technology and you must have some niches probably, but I mean the door is open there.
So, sir, why should small countries invest their scarce resources and their precious manpower in space exploration, not in other areas of space, but specifically in space exploration?
I think I agree with what everybody said in terms of not investing the bulk of your resources in exploration, but every nation shares at least one thing, and that's the innate desire to know what's beyond the hill. And I think every nation in the world, no matter how large or small, wants to be a part of that. One of the things that the President's done to me, or for me really, is he's directed me to go out and expand our partnerships, particularly to what he refers to and we now refer to as non-traditional partners. And what we mean is countries who have a desire to be like every other nation in exploration but don't have the resources, don't have the money, don't have the technical know-how, but have the desire. So we target what we call non-traditional partners to try to bring them into the family of spacefaring nations. The International Space Station is a great example of where all the 5 partners, I think, I could be wrong, but I think we have all agreed that part of our task is to draw other countries into participation in the International Space Station. You know, none of us are talking about increasing the partnership, but we're all talking about increasing the participation there so that as many nations as possible have an opportunity to be on the cutting edge of this exploration, if you will. I will say Curiosity, an example of how we tried to do that. Curiosity is an incredible achievement by any means or by any stretch of the imagination. Up until the time of Curiosity, there was only one nation that had successfully landed on Mars. Today, there are 5 nations who are physically on the surface as a part of Curiosity, Israel being one of them, Spain being another, Russia, on and on. 15 nations that have investigators who are part of the team. And so we get a certain sense of satisfaction fulfilling our leadership responsibility by making it possible for other nations to come along with us as partners.
And Curiosity was definitely a high point in reinvigorating everyone who's looking up into space. I think it's the most I've felt since we've seen the moon landing, well, maybe a couple of shuttle missions, but it caused a huge amount of excitement. And I'll ask you a bit later on how we continue exciting people, but I want to ask the smaller agencies, how do you capitulate on these missions, these space exploration missions, to attract the kids? We were talking about STEM education earlier on. We were talking about reaching the children and the excitement we see in their eyes. How do you leverage your investment in space exploration to get the kids involved? Again.
You know, there are a lot of research done on what really attracts kids to science when they are young. And usually they come with three attractions. One is space. Second one is robotics, robots. Kids love robots. And the third one is dinosaurs. So as the chairman of Israeli Space Agency, my wet dream is to build a robot, looks like a dinosaur, and to launch it to space. This will attract the imagination of all the kids in the world, I think. But speaking more seriously, you know, there are, because of this conference, not only professionals came here, but also some astronauts. And we use this opportunity, and they are going through schools, talking with children. I think you did it yesterday. And it has a huge effect on the kids, huge effect. I mean, they understand that science is not only, numbers and difficult formulas and things like this, but something that really is a challenge to them. And therefore, when you mentioned at the beginning that the government allocated a substantial increase in money for science, space exploration, not only military space here in Israel, part of the money is going to, is devoted to this area of what we call the community encouragement to deal with space in order to attract them to science.
Here.
I don't think it's very difficult to capitalize or to get the interest. We have people from the Space Center, first of all, they find it fantastic or really enjoyable or great fun. We have people that hardly would stay in office, they're just traveling around to schools. But I can turn it a little bit around. Maybe in Norway, we are not good enough in doing the kind of fancy things in space. We have always tried to be, let's say, cost efficient, show return on investment. So I must admit, we have not put that much priority on having astronauts and that kind of stuff. We are proud we have a space industry, in fact, 2% of the global market, which is quite good for a 5 million people country. But we don't make the fancy thing. If we make an announcement in a newspaper that we are selling parts to satellites or services on satellite, nobody cares. But when we had a curiosity, I mean, it filled up so many pages in a newspaper. And when there are astronauts, we have a neighbor country, Sweden, they have a Swedish astronaut. Of course, we call him Norwegian in Norway, since his father is Norwegian and has a Norwegian name. But you see, we have not been not good enough to do these things. Anyway.
Christian.
Well, I agree we could do more, but I would say that the landing of Curiosity, for instance, spawned a lot of interest in Denmark. And even though Denmark doesn't have a direct share in that, I mean, it created so much interest that it was good for our institute, for the universities, because all the press and our colleagues, friends came to us and asked what's happening. And that gave us a golden opportunity to talk about what are our own activities. So even though we don't participate in the high-flying missions all the time, these are great occasions to flag what are we actually doing. And that's also interesting to a lot of people.
I'd like to get a bit into the technology of it and into whether we can have relationships between the technology given to space exploration and what we use in everyday life. So steer away a moment from the normal satellites, but how do we take what we've done for space exploration and bring it to use in day-to-day life?
Our biggest focus in the U.S., to be quite honest, in our public outreach, is trying to help people understand that we explore because it enables us to bring value back to the U.S., back to Earth. It enables us to make life better here on Earth. Our vision, if you will, and some people like it, some people don't, if I can get it right, it says we reach for new heights to reveal the unknown so that what we do and learn makes life better for all humankind. And we go through with our international partners all the time trying to find ways to tell people what's coming back to Earth as a result of what we've done on the International Space Station. Whether it's pharmaceutical research that is on the verge of having a drug to solve the problem with salmonella certified, whether it is in using an ultrasound that we developed to be able to have astronauts do physicals on orbit with the doctor on the ground. We now find the value of ultrasound is incredible. It's now used in Africa. A doctor can send an ultrasound into a village that's 100, 200, 300 miles away from where the nearest hospital is, teach a woman or somebody in the village how to do an ultrasound on an expectant mother, and the doctor can talk to the mother on a routine basis and say, don't worry, I know you got pain, everything's okay. Next day, you need to get on a train, or you need to get on a bus, or you need to get on an ox, or whatever it is, and come in because, you know, the ultrasound says you need to be here. Those are just simple examples of value that comes back to Earth, not intended, because a lot of the stuff is serendipitous when you explore. If you know what you're going to find, it's not exploration, to be quite honest. Yeah.
How about the other way around? What can we take from other areas into space exploration? That'll advance technology in those other areas.
That's a tough question. I just gave the example of our need to make everything very lightweight. Okay. So this drove Israel to develop components in propulsion, even in the telescope themselves. I mean, you put mirrors in the telescope. Usually 2 mirrors are weighing more than the total weight of a normal satellite. And we needed only as 2 mirrors, one component in a telescope in a bigger satellite. And therefore, there is a lot of technology that you can use. You know, Israel, in relative speaking, Israel is #1 in the world in terms of percentage of GDP investing in R&D. And which means that relatively huge community here is dealing with R&D and technology and what we call high tech and things like this. So we were able to take technology, materials, for example, for the mirrors or the old thruster that is going to flight the next year into space, and things like this, to take technologies developed in other areas and to put them in space. And therefore to overcome this problem of going, many times when I meet, first time I meet chairman of space, other chairman of space agencies, one of the first questions they ask me why we go against the traffic. I mean, there are something like 15 Israeli low orbit satellites going the wrong direction. And usually I tell them that because we learn engineering in Hebrew. But this is not the reason.
Here.
Again, being a small country, very often you cannot afford, first of all, some expensive development of space hardware, and then after that, again, start fighting your way in competition with the other countries or participants. So you need to find where do you have competence to start with. And we are lucky in Norway, we have a quite large oil and gas exploration industry, and that kind of exploration has a lot of similarities with space. We have had a team constantly working since mid-90s on the logistics for the space station, based on the logistic that was developed for the North Sea, also quite expensive activities. Again, giving spin-off back to the North Sea. We have produced sensors, fuel cell systems that are now on the way to be qualified for space applications based on what we did subsea. Also, both manned and unmanned operations in subsea exploration has a lot of similarities. We have had developed drilling technology now being tested by NASA with their robotic vehicles up in northern Norway. So you find them over and over again. I could bore you, I could continue for half an hour on this, and this is such important for us. So we have established a program in Norway called Space and Energy, where we are not only trying to use the spin-in, but also try to, and that's the most successful stories, when you really can develop together against or towards two different targets.
Excellent. And Christian, is Denmark managing to take technologies from other areas into space and space exploration especially?
We are trying to, so in the areas of composites, for instance, the way you can design composites can make them thermally very attractive for space, for instance. So taking that a step further from more earthbound applications to space is one area where we have trying to take it a bit a step further. Other areas is, for instance, CubeSats and nanosats. That's an exciting way where you can test new materials in a relatively cheap way. You don't need a big satellite, but you can test some equipment and space qualified, so you can then use it for a bigger mission. So that's another way of spinning in new products from ground-based applications.
And I'd like to wrap it up by asking you, sir, how are you going to excite my grandson? And he's still many years away.
Yeah. Well, we have Will.i.am. I don't know how many of you know who Will.i.am is, but Will.i.am is a rock star. And we have a number of people like that who are interested in exploration. And he contacted us once and said, hey, you know, I love what you guys do. I'm a robotic nut, but you're not cool. And so if we're going to reach your grandkids, we've got to learn how to be cool. And if you were to have come to a NASA event 3-4 years ago, we would have been using standard types of communications. You know, we would have had the NASA guy talking on standard radio and television. Today, you probably can come several days early for any event, and there is what we call a NASA social. Started out being called a tweet up. There are probably people in the audience here who have come to NASA socials. They bring their cell phone, their iPad, their computer, anything. And what we ask them to do is they get tours, they sit in sessions where maybe an astronaut comes in, a scientist comes in, or somebody talks about the mission. The only request I make of them is that, look, you are now the voice of NASA. And so I want you to share your emotion. I want you to share what you're seeing, good and bad. If there's something really bad we're doing, tell people, but tell me also. But I want you to share the excitement of this moment with everybody else. That has just, it has increased our reach incredibly. It has increased the level of interest in what we do incredibly. A kid can tweet curiosity today. You know, we could never do that with any other spacecraft. But today, because of social media, a young kid can tweet curiosity and he gets an answer back, he or she. You know, those kinds of things are ways that we are really trying to excite the youth of today. We also spend a lot of time out on the road. We try to get our astronauts out. You can't be in every school, so we utilize, again, the communications medium. Around the world, there is some classroom full of students every single day, probably several classrooms full of students who have an astronaut come into their classroom from the International Space Station by a television downlink. So those are things that are being done by the partners internationally, and I think, I don't know whether we've reached your grandkids yet, but we're working on it.
They're still in preparation.
All right.
So. But how about my grandkids' kid? What of the science and missions that you are dreaming of today, not budgeting yet, but dreaming of today, are going to excitement? What is your fantasy of the thing that's going to get the kids excited in 20, 30 years' time?
Well, your grandkids' kids are going to be the ones that are going to be going to Mars. They won't be the first.
That's exciting.
But they will be the second generation of Mars explorers. They will be doing something that I thought I was going to do when I came to NASA in 1980. And I honestly thought that in my lifetime in NASA, whatever period of time that was, I would at least get to go back to the moon and probably go to Mars. And then we stumbled along the way. We had Challenger, we had other things. We shied away, we became fearful. I think the world is losing a little bit of its inhibitions now. And people are willing to explore and take risk. Every time I talk about, I mentioned it this morning in my comments, what we do is risky. That's what makes it fun, to be quite honest. You know, that's what will excite your great-grandchildren. They want to do something that puts them right on the edge. You're going to be worried, you're going to be scared, but you need to teach them they've got to study, they've got to prepare themselves, but they cannot be afraid of failure, and they've got to go out and take a risk. Elon, if he were here today, you know, if he were to descend from the ceiling. He would look around and tell us, hey, what I did was worth every second of it. Giving my life was worth every second of it.
Thank you very much, sir. And I think that's a great note to finish on. I would like to thank the panel members. Thank you for the remaining audience. And I would like to invite those of you who have invitations to join us at IAI for the reception this evening. So thank you very much.